Hello guys. Today we'll be talking about something that we almost everyone knows about, but we don't know how it really works. So turbos, big turbo, twin turbo, and big turbo. It means power, speed, and you know about the sound. So in the conquest for greater economy, fuel economy, many car makers are turning to turbochargers. Often we call them turbos. And the reason they are turning to turbochargers is to make the engines more powerful and efficient too. For instance, the latest Porsche 911, for instance, they have turbochargers as standard as they come. They come standard with turbochargers. And even the BMW M3 series, the latest models, of course. It's not just sports cars that have turbos though. Many mainstream cars now, they come with all petrol engines with turbo. And for instance, we can talk of Ford Mondeo. For instance, they use turbochargers, and almost all modern diesel engines, they have turbos as well. The explanation for the recent popularity of turbos is simple. They allow manufacturers to make their cars more efficient by making engines smaller without losing out on power. But what's going on under the bonnet? How do turbochargers work? So in this episode, we are going to do it in two segments. The first segment, we will be talking about the turbochargers. And the next segment, which will be the next video, we will be talking about superchargers. But first, remember to subscribe to our channel, Infimus Motors Review. Hit the subscription button below and the like button too. You can also talk to us on the comment section below to tell us what you think or what you learned about the turbos today. Let's go. To understand turbos, you have to know how basic engine works. Think of an engine like a large pump. It sucks in air and fuel into a cylinder, compresses and combusts it before pumping out the goodies that people like to get angry about. To get more power from the engine, we need to burn more fuel more quickly. Getting fuel is usually as simple as turning your tap up. But unless there is more air, that extra fuel will just be useless. But a cylinder is limited in how much air it can breathe. It's limited by both its size or the displacement, what we call the displacement. But historically, when engine makers wanted more air to mix with the fuel, they needed a bigger cylinder. But there was no replacement for displacements. And this made the engine larger because they increased the size of the cylinder. Of course, it made the engine heavier too, and often at times slow to rev. But there was a breakthrough in 1905 when a Swiss engineer named Alfred Bucay came up with a replacement for displacement when he used the exhaust gas of an engine to power a compressor that fed denser air into the combustion chamber. More air meant more fuel could burn and get more boom. Turbos were quickly adopted by the aeronautical industry. For instance, when you are 20,000 feet up, the air is almost half as dense, and the engines would lose much as half of their power. So, a turbo restored air pressure on the engine back to the sea level pressure, and this is what we call turbo normalization. But when a turbo is used to exceed that pressure, that's called turbocharging. So, how does all this crap works? Well, this is the turbo. As the engine expels exhaust gases, they enter in here. The exhaust air gets piped over to this turbine and spins it like a pinwheel. Now we are done with the exhaust. It gets shot out through the back of your car. The turbine is connected to this impeller on the other side of the turbo, and it spins too. As it spins, it sucks in tons of air through this inlet and shoots it out through your intake manifold. The air is now more dense, so it has more oxygen, meaning more gas will be burnt more quickly, giving you more power. To keep that charged air from going back into the turbo when you lift up the throttle, a blow-off valve relieves the pressure by letting the air go back into the atmosphere. That's why you get that cool sound. Turbocharging creates a lot of heat. The turbine side constantly has a blazing exhaust gas passing through it, making it literally red hot. And by the way, you may have noticed that this side, which is appropriately referred to as the hot side of a turbo, often looks rusty. And this is the reason. Let's get a bit into chemistry and physics. The extreme heat acts as a catalyst, causing the metal to oxidize more quickly. This side also generates heat. When you compress air, you push the molecule closer together. This creates some friction when they rub against each other, of course. All these hot energized molecules, they move around everywhere, and then they increase the speed of the air, and that makes them lose density. The whole point of the forced induction is to get the air more dense, right? Well, if we cool off all the hot turbocharged air, the molecules will cool down. It will sit closer together and become more dense. There are a few ways to do this. The most popular and yet the simple way is to use an intercooler. In a car, an intercooler sits between the turbo and the engine. What it does, the air passes through the channel with the cooling fins. The cool air passes over the fins from outside, from the air from the atmosphere passes through these fins. It absorbs the heat and reduces the temperature. And by the way, if your Subaru's got the hole on the hood, don't worry, because that's for your intercooler. So now you know that a turbocharger is an air compressor. So if you want more power, why don't you just get the largest turbo there is? Well, it's not that easy. If a turbo is too big, it takes a lot of time for the exhaust to get it spinning enough to compress the air into turbo lag. And the time between hitting the gas and feeding the boost is what we are talking, or it's what we are calling the turbo lag. But engineers solve this problem by using two small turbos to push more air than one large turbo. When we think of a twin turbo as their own category, there's actually multiple ways to put the two turbos on an engine. Talk of parallel turbocharging, talk of sequential charging, talk of racer extent, talk of two-stage turbocharging. We shall come to that. The first commercially available twin turbo car, the idea was put in between a Maserati by Turbo, sold in 1981, and the first production attempt at twin turbocharging, it used the simplest method of applying two turbos to an engine. When you talk of multiple way, you can start with parallel turbocharging. So as long as there is enough space in the engine bay, using two turbos is actually easier than using one big turbo. So when an engine has two banks of cylinder, such as V-shaped engine, each bank can have its own turbo rather than rounding all the cylinders into a single turbo. So achieving the proper power balance between the banks proved to be a challenge. But again, in the early twin turbo cars, like the talk of the Nissan 300ZX, talk of Mitsubishi 3000 GT, designer found that the easiest way to get it right was to have each turbo fed the opposite cylinder bank instead of the one that it was closest to. For instance, if it's a V-shaped, the turbo on this side fed the cylinders on the other side, and this form a healthy feedback loop that automatically balances the power between the two banks. So, but again, crossing the V, it solved one problem, yes, but it created another one. The turbos would spoil quickly. But now remember, the charge, they had to travel further before it reached the engine. Definitely that would created a turbo lag. Next, let's talk about sequential charging. Well, parallel turbocharging, they uses equally sized turbos that are working 100% of the time, full time I mean. Sequential system, they uses a retro turbo that spoils you up quickly to tide you over until another larger turbo has the time to spoil you up. And this method, by the way, it alleviates turbo lag and provides much smoother power gain. And to control the flow of the exhaust to the correct turbo at the right rev range, a series of bypass valves opens and closes just at the right time, and this ensures that the proper turbo is getting spoiled at the proper time. And by the way, both Mark IV and the FDRX7, they use sequential turbo system, and really those cars ruled in the 90s. So turbocharging is a perfect example of performance technology trickling down to the rest of the market. The 80s and the 90s, for instance, they paved the way for the modern turbocharging, and almost anything can come with a turbo, and that means that sometimes even normal drivers can have a retro fun whenever they want to. So now, the theory behind turbochargers and superchargers is no more complicated than blowing on a fire to make it have bigger frames. Obviously, the practical application of turbos must be carefully controlled, and engineers, of course, have come up with refinements over years, such as intercoolers, which cool the air, allowing it to become more compressed. Those are some physics lessons, and therefore more efficient in its operation, of course. So the principle, however, is that turbochargers and superchargers are just powerful fans blowing extra air into the engine to provide more power. Anyway, guys, do you like the video about air and gases? Check out this other episode on superchargers that is dropping next. I believe you've subscribed. Do you want to give this video a thumbs up and hit the notification bell below? You can also leave us a comment on what you think about turbochargers. Cheers.